It's so good to be with all of you again,
Mhm.
especially since last week. Well, we'll see if part of last week comes out this week. We took a week-long pause because this girl right here was not only moving to another state, but moving for the second time in a matter of weeks,
Mhm.
and completely flipping her lid and losing her shit. So uh, we took a pause, recircled the wagons, and here we are today, all of us in our wonderful states of being. And so I just want to call us all together for the beautiful imperfection, work of art in progress that each and every one of us is. And just, I want to have each one of us just put both hands on our hearts. That dark side of us, that light side of us, that side of us that says we're too much, too aggressive, too sassy, too pushy, too whatever, too fat, too thin. And also that side of us that oftentimes feels like we're not enough. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough looks. We don't have enough friends. We don't have enough love. We don't have enough to survive. And just recognize how, even in our stories of too much and not enough, whatever they may be, we always have everything we need right here and now. We're all sitting here together in a safe space. Our hearts are beating. Can you feel the rhythm? With your hands on your heart, can you notice the rhythm of the pounding of your chest? Can you feel the gentle rhythm and flow of your breath in and out? We have air in which to breathe. And can we just appreciate in this moment that we aren't fighting for our lives right now, even though sometimes our mind wants to tell us we are. Our mind's running around like a 2-year-old with a kitchen knife. Danger, danger, danger. But really, when we stop and just get really present with what's going on and can appreciate that we have the breath and a beating heart, there's really nothing else we need in this moment. So just take a second. And for those of you listening or watching, just take a second to appreciate that you are alive right now. And I know that that can be really just hard to do sometimes. Because the mind wants to say, but. And sometimes it wants to say things like, you don't get to tell me what to do. You don't know me. And we just need to smile and know everything in this moment is just fine. Truly just fine. Are you ready to get this party started?
That felt so amazing. I felt like you just hugged me with your words. through the computer. Thank
Good.
you. Thank you.
Erin, what are you giggling about over there?
Oh, good. I'm giggling at how like relaxed I was. And then I have myself on mute, but do you hear the banging and the like reorganization of furniture and like all of these things that are happening? I'm just like, okay, this party started.
How you doing, Brenda?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to let y'all, actually, Brenda, I'd like to invite you to do the same thing that you've done with all of us for me and lead us through the things.
All right. Happy to. The first stop on our path is the core wound, which is your design Mars on your human design chart. And we've discussed that the human design charts are available. You can run your own. I currently use Genetic Matrix to do mine, and you need your birth date, time, and information, just a little background for anybody who's watching who hasn't run their charts. And the core wound is an item of the gene keys, and that is your design Mars. And in Tanya's case, this is the 33, the gate 33, which is called retreat. And it's one of the 2 natural storytelling gates, which we all know Tanya is an excellent storyteller and analogy maker and all the things. Your succinct stories are reflective, sober, and not highly embellished. Your storytelling is authentic life experience and can be woven into a magical moral or analogy. The truths of your account stem from the stories that the universe makes you sample. The experiences and challenges come so thick and fast, you must retreat from time to time and take a complete break from everything, or a pause, right? Retreating gives you strength and clarity about any wisdom garnered from your experience, as well as allowing you to mull over your experience and present your conclusions. Gate 33 sends you into the thick of it to guide others by using your storehouse of accumulated experiences. Going along with this is a sharp memory capacity to catalog your creative riches. More can happen to you in a day than happens to most people in a week.
True.
Your difficulty is knowing when to retreat. If you don't do it at the right time, you can face chronic fatigue and near collapse. Utilizing spas, silent retreats, the countryside, meditation, or gentle pastimes, refreshment and recharging are essential to cope with the pace of your life.
Yeah. And then you throw moving 1, 2+ times into a matter of weeks. You have a hot disaster for pushing the boundaries of those things. So in my 33, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about what this last week was like for me in all of that richness. So there's a few things going on. I am brought back to my cellular biology class. When I was going back to school thinking that I wanted to do something other than nails, I wanted to be a coach, I wanted to help people. I couldn't decide if I wanted to be a doctor or a nurse. I knew that there was something I wanted to do to help humans feel better. And I thought I didn't want to be telling them what was wrong with them. I wanted to tell them what was right with them. And so I had started down the A&P and cellular biology courses and whatnot, thinking that I was going to finally get my degree. And a part of our cellular biology class, not only were we learning about the cell as an individual and its receptors and things like that, but we were learning about DNA. And DNA is just like a ton of information that's in the body. And each one of us, right? And we get pairs from our father, pairs from our mother. Those come together, and that is what writes the new DNA strands that are within us. So how does that have anything to do with the 33? So there are 64 codons in the I Ching, which Gene Keys and Human Design is based on. And it's like a massive amount of information. And I'm sure anyone who's been around for any amount of time has probably heard the idea of junk DNA. Has everybody heard junk DNA? There is no such thing as junk DNA. It's just information that's either not accessed or not used or put together. So with the 64, we basically have in our DNA a divine recipe book for putting ourselves together. And I am a huge believer in we create our own reality. I'm with this a little bit beyond what most people see when we talk about we are the creators of our own reality. People are like, yeah, if I think positive, I might be able to get myself a Porsche, or, you know, some money in the bank, or the man of my dreams, or the woman of my dreams, right? But I believe it starts before we're even here, these bodies. This is all information that's in our cells. And with that, we also have the information of where that came from, like our mother, our father, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and so on, back to pretty much the dawn of man, right? So with all of this, where am I going with all of this, right? If we are the creators of our own reality, we truly believe that, then we have the recipes within us to create and do anything that we want. We are the creators. We are like waves in an ocean. We are not separate from the ocean. We are part of the ocean. But as soon as we become a wave, we think that we are separate. I know I'm kind of mixing my metaphors here, but if anybody is not following where I'm at with this on this call right now, like give me a side eye. Y'all are with me. Okay. When we think that we are separate, we act differently. And there's a certain amount of forgetting that needs to allow ourselves to be the wave. To come into a human body, to have a human existence. If we just came and everything was perfect, there would be no fun in that. So we have to forget. We have to basically disassociate ourselves from the ocean for a little while and think that we're just the wave, so that we have the pleasure of realizing we're more than just the wave, we are the ocean, and coming back into ourselves. So that retreat, that introspection is a process that when we create our own reality, we have to forget who we really are in order to have the experiences that we want to have. Because if someone said, hey, I've got this great gig, are you interested? So we're going to put you in this like 3D suit, and then you're going to have things like abuse or rape or trauma, harm to your body, a sense of loss that's going to make you feel like you just want to die. You're going to choose that on purpose. Yin, everybody would be like, sorry, no, like, I'm not interested in that. No, thank you. Next. Right? But if we came here and we just had this ordinary existence, we never had anything happen to us. And we can have oftentimes a childhood that seems like a really great childhood, and we still have stuff that comes with that. I'm not saying that we all have to have these kind of big experiences, but I came here for a big experience, and I was in a place of being the victim of that for a very, very long time. And the minute I reminded myself, the minute I stopped forgetting who I was, I got mindful, I went inward. I started detaching from that victim story that I am just the wave. And yeah, so for me, the 33 has been it's been probably one of the most challenging parts of my design, the forgetting part. And it's been one of the most gifted parts of my design. The friends that we're staying with right now, we've been playing games every night, which just makes my little girl inside like full of joy, because that was one of the favorite aspects about my childhood. I did not have an easy childhood, which I'm sure y'all can discern. But around holidays or birthdays or special occasions, we would always get together. We'd have good food. We would play games. We would laugh and we would giggle. And so we've been doing that every night after dinner. We pull out a game and we play a new game. And a couple of them have, like last night, we played like Dead of Winter, I think. It was basically like The Walking Dead. And so we were fighting zombies. And the night before that, we played an island one where you had to save the treasures off the island to get clear. And then the night before, we played Pandemic. And about each one of these games, our friends were like, yeah, we put it in the hard mode. What's the fun of making it easy? And I was just like, that's all of life, right?
I need to know, are these real games or made up games?
No, they're real games.
Okay.
In fact, Pandemic came out before the pandemic.
Of course it did.
And then it wasn't called Treasure Island. I'll have to get the name of the other game that we played. And then last night's Dead of Winter was the zombie ones. It was quite the layout and spread. I took some pictures last night. I was like, this is crazy, but yeah, it was fun.
I was going to ask you, Tanya, what is the word I'm looking for, precipitous? Like what, when you started to come out of victim mentality and into like ownership, what was there a turning point for you, or was it, over time, or was there a specific moment, or what was it that?
There was a triggering moment.
Okay. Yeah.
It was 2017, July of 2017, I believe. And 2017 or 2018, doesn't really matter that much. I was working as a CrossFit coach. My life felt pretty good. I felt like money wasn't so much an issue. My body I was like happy enough with it, except for the fact that my blood pressure was high and I still had thyroid meds. And I was like, I had a bunch of different medications for kidney problems, digestive problems, just a number of health issues. But they were good enough with the herbs and all the things that I was doing, because I tried so many different things. Anyway, that's a whole nother storytelling. But I got done coaching one afternoon, came out, and I had a message from my brother, Tim, who said that our dad was dying and he thought I should know. He knew that we didn't have a relationship, but he thought I should know. And I thought about it and I thought about it. I was like, is there anything I need from him? I came home and I told David, my husband, I'm like, yeah, apparently my dad's dying. And he said, is there anything you need from him? And I was like, I don't think so. I had forgiven him probably in my 20s. Just before David and I got married, I had a private investigator track him down. He had abandoned me as a baby, had a challenging relationship with him as a young kid, and then got kicked out when I was 15 in a very glorified way. Again, another story, but essentially had the private investigator track him down right before I got married. And I said, I forgive you. Because for the longest time, I had fantasies of wanting to prove my dad wrong. When we last, it wasn't even spoke. I can't even say spoke. The last interaction that I'd had with my father before that phone call was him nearly dislocating my jaw, picking me up out of my chair to call me a hot pants little whore, and told me never to darken his doorstep again, that I would never amount to anything. And I spent probably the last part of my teenage years just dead set to prove him wrong. And I got to a point, I don't know where the forgiveness came from, but I just was like, you know what? I met a good man. I'm happy and I'm getting married. And so that's the brief conversation we had in my early 20s. So here I am coming up to 50 and finding out that he's dying. And I really haven't had any relationship with him since then. And when David said, are you sure there isn't anything you need from him? I was like, all right, well, I'll go sit with this. So that's what I do. I turn inward. 33, introspection, that mindfulness. So I went into meditation, and the craziest damn thing happened, which I did not see coming. As I was sitting there, I had tuned into my inner child and my inner little girl. I would call her my love. My teenager was my power. My little girl, my little love, she just always like golden blonde hair, big brown eyes, and just like so much joy. And as I was sitting there, in my mind's eye, I see in very vivid pictures, she comes up to me holding a heart in each hand. And she said, the reason that we have so much heart disease in our family is because we are not being the love that we are truly meant to be. It's not about what you need from him. It's about what he needs from you. I was like, well, fuck. Like she had my mom's heart and my dad's heart in her hands. So at that point, I reached out and I sent a note and said that I truly did wish him a safe passage into his sweet surrender, that I was glad that he found love and an ability to express himself creatively. My dad was a brilliant artist and, ended up being an engineer. He did paint more later in life. I've not seen any paintings that he did. I did, however, when I was a little girl, watch him sketch out a black stallion just out of his mind's eye that, from what I remember, I felt like it came to life on the page. So after I reached out, I got a message back about a week or so later that said, your dad really wants to talk to you if you're open to that. I hadn't talked to my dad since then, and I had not talked to his wife for 30 years. And his wife was the one who basically plucked me out of school that day and isolated me and said, wait till your father gets home. And I hadn't seen her, talk to her since about a 2 or 3 hour drive from Carlsbad, New Mexico to Lubbock, Texas, where they flew me back to my mom. And they said, you know, he can't talk much, but he really wants to talk to you. I said, okay. And so when he got on the phone, the first things he said to me was, I love you. I'm sorry. I miss you. I love you. And that was what started everything for me.
The word that I just kept resonating with for you in the story was forgiveness and forgive, and how you often will talk about how like forgiveness is forgiving, right? Like it's like you both, through the act of maybe some forgiveness, I don't know if that's the word you would use there, like you both were able to give each other something.
Yeah.
Right. And like what a catalyst that was for you in so many ways. So many ways.
I felt like it was sort of a litmus test for me, having that conversation and just being able to receive that from him felt like, yes, I truly had forgiven him, because I didn't need to hear that from him. But the fact that he did and I received it, I felt like it was a gift for both of us. Yeah. I said, I love you too. And I do. What's the next one, Brenda? Unless you guys have other questions.
All right. The next one is your Chiron, which in human design and astrology is about when you feel where you feel you aren't good enough, where there's a huge potential for growth, and that this energy can also heal others. And for you, that's your gate 25, innocence. Innocence. Your gentle, childlike innocence belies a life that is often complicated and demanding. You have a deep trust that the universe will look after you and love will conquer all. You can embrace the unexpected, knowing you will come through. One of the 4 love gates, you attune to a universal, unconditional form of love that stands in the face of unexpected chaos and drama and keeps on growing wise. You interact with the world with honesty, truthfulness, and sincerity. You rarely prepare what you're going to say, opposite of me. It often comes out with the innocence of a child, sometimes leaving your loving nature vulnerable to be taken advantage of by others. You can forgive transgressions, but your good virtue doesn't forget them. You are a tender being, susceptible to rude and obnoxious people. Your innocence can't quite grasp why others have a problem with life when love is all around. Your stock response is, I hear you, but just trust in life. You might attempt healing the world through your unwavering love and trust. Don't underestimate your own need for recuperation when a challenge has been overcome.
What?
That just spoke volumes, didn't it?
Is coming up. I'm like, you're crying. Tell us all the things.
This was last week. This was everything last week.
Do you want to elaborate for people that are watching, or?
So a lot of stuff comes up in my body. And I think it's that way for a lot of people, actually. And we don't, because we're not in our bodies, we're not connected to that. Last week, I was basically in the situation of knowing that it was our last week where we were staying with our friend Patty, getting ready to move to our friends in California. And honestly, like, super grateful and appreciative to our friends, and totally not knowing what we were walking into. Like, we knew that we would have a room, that they had space for us, but we didn't, we didn't know a lot of stuff. And both Brenda and Kristie last week were, it was actually like the tail end of the week before, had caught a creative uprising, and they were both just like fired up. And I was feeling stressed out, overwhelmed, and I didn't quite realize I was just about to the end of my resources. For me, love is my devotional. It is everything for me. And one of the things that it's interesting that universal love and innocence is the two things that describe it, because I've been talking about love since I was a little kid. I had I burned my Garfield journal as part of a ritual ceremony that I remember. I am the record keeper of in 1977, because I remember this special way I made sevens in my little Garfield journal, about love, talking about love and just wanting people to love me for who I am. And like, money's never been a thing for me. I don't know what it is. I'm like, I just got gold, just shit gold kind of thing. I can find it. In fact, before coming into this, David's like, go make some money. I'm like, dude, I am the money. My love is my gold. And when I was little, I always felt like I would get taken advantage of. I would have great ideas or creative ideas, or I just wanted so much to be loved because I hadn't found it within myself. So I was always looking outside of myself for it everywhere. I had a tendency to overdo. I had a tendency to try to be perfect, not give you any reason or excuse to have to reject me. I would compromise myself horribly so often. And with all of the moving and all of the things that had to be done, I was feeling a great deal of pressure and not wanting to temper anyone else's excitement. Like, please create, be excited. If I could offer anything, just recognize where the energy is coming from, because I've created from fear and I've created from just divine inspiration, and they're different. And so my request to have a pause last week, quite possibly either I didn't deliver it well. I had sent a Marco Polo, I had written some stuff in WhatsApp, and I just felt like I was about to explode. I didn't know all that I know now, because hindsight, introspection is always like crystal clarity of vision. So yeah, the thing that had me crying was just like the innocence of love, because my little girl came up last week and she was like, I just don't matter. People just want to take what they can from me. And that was an old story that was coming up. And what I also didn't realize in that moment, because my lid was a little flipped, I have a pretty large capacity these days for being able to bring myself back off the brink pretty quickly. What I didn't foresee that was coming was sort of like my Olympics, my crescendo of this year of being off of my value and the value that I bring. my friend Patty, when we sat and had a conversation just before we left, she's like, having you here has been an incredible gift. And I'm like, really? And then coming here to our friend Greg and Jen's, they're like, we have been so excited for you guys to be here. It's such a gift. And I'm like, what? Because what this brought up at a physical level was anytime I'd ever moved and trying to integrate into my environment and find my value, and having several things of old stories be triggered this last week. Is that making any sense? I know it probably does to you guys, but you were asking about the tears.
Okay.
My thought is the common thread is your story,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you not feeling wanted, not feeling valuable. And
Yep.
I think this was something that we did get to kind of reflect on. And I think what no one will get to ever witness with us is our behind the scenes conversations and how raw and vulnerable we are with each other, and the safe space that we hold, and that we got to voice our perception, even with some fear, right? Like I know I'm
Yeah.
just speaking for myself, to say some things that I felt cautious, like, oh Lord, they're going to kick me out of this damn group, And
I felt too.
Yeah. And so you saying what you said, even though it was triggering to me, allowed me to come back to you, or to us, right? It was kind of at you, given the circumstance, but with so much vulnerability. It's like your vulnerability matched my vulnerability, and we just like went back and forth, right?
Yep.
And it allowed for that repair, and for your little story, your story from your little girl, from your childhood, to be reminded that it doesn't have to exist anymore, right?
To be rewritten, right? That's
Yeah.
how this is why repair is so critical.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just keep repeating the same shit. I oftentimes talk about that as like, it's the hamster wheel versus the spiral staircase.
Yeah.
The spiral staircase, you just keep working your way up. Sometimes it feels like you're going right back down, but most of the time you're working your way up. In the hamster wheel, you're just doing this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and nothing ever changes.
Right.
And that's that repair piece. If we don't have repair, if we're actually even pushed harder, then it just drives us deeper into that being set in the hamster cage.
Yeah. And to me, I think the byproduct of that has been your opportunity to receive.
Mm-hmm. It
And
has.
And also, like, I think it kind of comes twofold, right? Like, I think when I witness people receiving, it's just a better practice that it's safe and that it's valuable and it's not selfish. Like there's so many stories that we have attributed to things. So,
Mm-hmm.
but all of this had to happen. To me, it's like, it just is like the foundation of it is all just vulnerability, right? Like we had to all be willing to share and willing to
Be witnessed.
Yeah.
Be witnessed and not flipped. Yeah.
Yeah. But even like in our flipping, right? Like, I mean, we are still humans, right? So even for us to witness each other, have our triggers, our buttons pushed, and to be met with compassion and love, and like to give that true repair a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Tanya.
No, please.
I was just going to say, Brenda's word, I use connection, but I really mean intimacy. And Brenda's word is intimacy. And I just think about like what Kristie just said is like real intimacy doesn't happen without vulnerability. And like, it gives me chills thinking about this, because one of the things I think, and I know we're talking about Tanya, but like who you is like teaching. I have a different backstory on business and like teaching people how to do business in a completely different way, which is intimacy, right? Like, and vulnerability. And like through that is where the change in the transgression is not the right word, right? Transformation or like transcendence happens, right? Like we don't have to be vulnerable, but when we are so vulnerable is where like we like exponentially expand, I guess, if that's and doing it from a place, like Kristie said, through love and compassion, right? Like, yes, we're human and our lids are flipped, and also from a place of just sheer love, right? Like love for ourselves, love for our fellow people, humans, business partners, whatever we want to call it, right? Like all of that, and meeting that with such grace and love. And I just think that we're such a beautiful example of doing that, and it takes a lot of courage, right? Because this is not something, at least for me, that I have ever been modeled, right? Like this is how cycles are broken. This is how things get the fork in the road, right? The path gets to go a different way because we are doing it a different way.
Yeah.
So
It's also a testament to the practice of commitment. So I was thinking about this the other day that, like with our kids, that certainly ups the ante of being able to say, I'm done. I walk away from you, which I had that experience. And many times we as parents have wanted to just be like, I'm done with you, right? To reject. When we are growing, when we are changing, when we are being vulnerable, a lot of times we want to hit that eject button. And it can be varying degrees of easier or harder to do that with either children, a spouse, friendships, right? So in this case, like we're all friends that have been brought together in different ways, right? We haven't all known each other the same amount of time. We've sort of like patchwork ourselves together. And, it's one thing to do vulnerability with your child. It's one thing to do vulnerability with your spouse, but then to be in a chosen group of people where you're establishing that safe space, where you're establishing rooting within your heart. That is a whole nother level, right? When Erin and I started out, we were doing it one-on-one. I was one-on-one with my friend Tiffany for a good year of having uncomfortable conversations about being seen when we're not in our, here's my persona I'm showing you. So you take those one-on-one relationships and then you open it up, and now there's 4 of us having these conversations on a daily basis, having these interactions on a daily basis. And it pushes that container of commitment. Is that making sense?
Yep.
It's like we're choosing to allow this. And sometimes we're a little bit like, shit, I'm scared.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to do this.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that, that's come up big for me this week. Like that, I feel like my chair is so squeaky today, sorry. The safety of being emotional, right? The safety in being angry, the safety in being pissed off, and if there's a difference there. But, like all the emotions that we have as humans, and from my experience, a lot of it was like unsafe.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because my emotion would then be like either shut down or punished.
Spankins over here.
So yeah, it's like, again, we are creating a new story for all of us it's like this capsule to be like, it's okay there, right? Like, yeah, there's vulnerability, there's a new story of safety and security, and
we all each have our own defense mechanisms, right? Like Tanya's more so has always been love, right? So she wants to, correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, like she wants to connect. And I have always been more like, oh, well, you're too difficult, I'm just going to pull away, right? That has been my defense mechanism. And when you say like, we're chosen family, we're chosen business partners, all of that, right? Like with your spouse, yes, you can get divorced, but it takes some time, right? And your child, you can leave, but there's a little bit, but here there's nothing that's stopping you from, other than choosing love, right? And commitment, there's not a tie that like you have in a partnership or parent-child relationship,
Do you care if I always feel like I have to ask for permission? So y'all know my love for Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle, right? This is like hot and heavy right down my brain. But I think it was Untamed, in Glennon's book, she talks about being in yoga and like staying on the mat was like so hard. And then she'd go, the damn door wasn't even locked. And like, I feel like that here, like our experience together is like being on the mat at yoga, right? And like sometimes it's like glorious and it just feels like a warm hug, and then other times you're just like wrestling a beast, and like all the while the door's not even locked. Like you can just take a minute and like catch your breath and then come back to the mat like when you're ready.
Yep.
That's sorry, I just
No, I think that's perfect, because we forget that the beast is usually
us.
Like every time oh wait, there's 3 pointing back at me. I know that's like a very old reference, but yeah. And we reflect that for each other, right? And so,
and sometimes we don't see it.
No, that happens.
I'm like, I love the questions that you throw back at me, and I'm like, oh, okay. Now I see myself there. Okay, it's fun.
So speaking of seeing, Brenda.
Next.
Yes, ma'am. Next. The last one we're talking about today is your North Node, which is your current purpose in life. And that for you is gate 17, which is called following. There is no better diplomat or debater than you. This gate is not afraid of being strongly opinionated, but also entertains a broad spectrum of views about all aspects of life. You love to have your opinions tested and can encourage fair debate that hears both sides of any story. This logical thinking fosters cooperation and understanding between all opposing sides and foes, and in all situations, you can be both forceful and fair. You're likely to entertain opinions about almost everything and then ponder them while remaining alert to the input of others. Sometimes you can become fixed in your views, but remember that your mind just needs to be open without attachment to any views that strike you as harsh or irritating. Your natural inclination is to be fair, balanced, and impartial. What matters to you is the quality of life you imagine, and you're quick to follow the views of anyone who can show you a way of enhancing it. The views of anyone who can show you a way of enhancing it.
Yep. Third eye, the vision, and being able to see both sides. In fact, there was a point last week where I was having my lid flip, coming apart at the seams moment, and I'm texting Erin. I'm like, I don't know why I do this because we don't text this way anymore. I'm like, or I'm voice to texting and then I'm like, fuck, that's not what I said.
ERIN.
Yeah. And then it spaces it all out. And I'm like, ah. And then the one time I say Erin and it spells it right. I'm like, oh.
Of course.
I was texting her going, why don't I matter? Why doesn't anybody ever think of me? And I know this isn't true. Like, I know this is just my own mirrored, like I'm just in my own story right now. I can see that that's not true. Like, of course I matter. I can see that. And I'm sitting here right in the middle of my own paradox. And yeah, that served to actually be able to just help me laugh at myself at that point. But I certainly had to vent that last bit of anger that was there, which this is what we do for each other. My friend Patty and I were talking after an interaction that we had. It's always us with us, always us with us. The time that we were there, we had our own private little space, 300 square feet. And not to go into the details necessarily of what the interaction was, but she had her own things going on. Her lid got flipped. She said some things that my inner wounding was like, ooh, that stung a little bit. But I have been practiced enough to know that I was like, okay, what I'm actually witnessing here right now is this pattern. And I'm just going to sit here and allow what needs to be said, and to just say back, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I see you. And leave it at that in that moment. And then afterwards, when we came back and we were talking, she'd had a chance to sort of like, you know what? I realized it's like, this has been my day so far. Like, I get it. And I was able to hold the space for her. The conversation that came up was like creating a steel blade. When we are wanting to create a steel blade, we have to put it in the fire and we have to get it really hot, and then we're pounding it. And then we're putting it back into the fire to refine it. And that's what we do for each other. We scorch each other. Oftentimes what happens for most people, though, within our families, within our places, is we're all, each one of us, having those moments of feeling like we're being held in the fire. And we're all just in survival mode. We're all just reacting to each other. And in doing so, nobody has a safe space in which to express whatever it is that's coming up. And fire is one of the hardest. Anger, fire is one of the hardest because it feels like a more powerful thing. And so when we're healing from trauma, we go first into fire. We want to fight. This is most of your teenagers, right? They're ready to fight you. They get mad. And then if that keeps getting squashed, or the opponent, the adults, have a greater force, a greater ability to make misery, then oftentimes then that gets, okay, I'm going to flee. I'm going to push away. And then sometimes that falls all the way down into that freeze where we've basically just immobilized ourselves. We're a walking shell of who we once were because we've basically frozen our emotions, put them on ice, detached from the body. There we are. So when we're healing, we have to go out the same way we came in. Well, getting out of freeze into flee, like, no, I'm putting up all my boundaries. I'm getting great at putting up all my boundaries. That's wonderful. And the next thing that comes from that usually is that fight, that anger, that heat. That is that is a lot of energy. That's big energy. And sometimes we don't feel like we have a safe place. That's the pounding and the like into the fire and the pounding that occurs with that. So when we're able to be in these kinds of spaces, and sometimes there's a little overlap, right, in where we each are in the fire. When we're able to be there with that safe space, the recovery is the cooling of the blade. Being able to come out and express that emotion, and then afterwards, instead of beating ourselves up for it or blaming the other person, saying, this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't because of you, which is usually where we then go back into our own self-defense. We don't necessarily want to hurt someone. We're just in our own safety bubble. And some of us respond to that by lashing out at others, saying, you did this, you're responsible. Or we retreat, we go back in a little inwards. And sometimes we can go all the way back to freeze. So that's why the recovery piece is so, so, so important, because that is where we go back in with compassion. I see that you had your lid flipped. Mine was too. Yeah, it stung a little bit. In this case, you know, with my friend, it was, I could see that your lid was flipped. I knew that what you were saying was not necessarily about me. It was about all of these other things. You know, letting yourself get too far thirsty before you ask for some water. Letting yourself become dehydrated before you ask for a drink. And it gave us this opportunity to talk and for her to meet herself with some compassion. This is what I've done to survive. This is how I've kept myself safe, right? So with the vision, being able to hold a higher vision, being able to sustain all that I want to do in that higher vision, I have to be prepared, and I don't fool myself into thinking I will ever be done. But I do want to be prepared that when the Olympic moment comes, when I'm in the Ninja Warrior gauntlet, I'm prepared to be able to meet each and every person with the kindness, the remembering that they've just forgotten, with unconditional love, because that's what I'm building me out of. And with that higher vision of knowing who their higher self, who their true self really is. Yeah, like I see all of them connected, the 33, the 25, and the 17. For me, I can see that connection and why it's so important. I didn't mean to like completely want you guys to be able to input.
Brenda, do you have anything you want to say or ask?
Oh, the question I was going to ask was the one you asked. What precipitated her awakening, for lack of a better term?
Mm-hmm.
When
And
it
it's not
started getting messy.
Go ahead, Kristie.
I was just going to say, I feel like all of this just allowed us to see the different layers of Tanya, you know, and I think that you just so beautifully kind of summarized it just now about like being unconditional love.
I thought about that this morning when I woke up. I was like, you know, in my teenage years, when a lot of all the moving has brought up a lot of old, like over compromising myself and allowing myself to be taken advantage of. I was like, my teenage years, this body was built out of revolt. Like very much reactive. And now what I think about every day, I don't give a shit about diets. I don't give a shit about like how I exercise or move this body. Everything I do needs to come back to unconditional love. Building this out of unconditional love. So thanks for seeing that.
I was going to say, and you know, we've talked about like power and love. And I think kind of like what Kristie said, going back to unconditional love, for us that have more of the power piece in us than the love piece, or we're working on that, right? Like, I mean, we have both, right? But what is the tendency for me? I'll speak for myself. What is the tendency for me is to pull away and to not show love, or to withhold love, or to, you know, is like, you're such a beautiful example of like coming back to love. And that's not to say that we pour love on when we're really pissed off, right? When our lid is flipped, I think that's really important for people to know. Like, when we're not saying when our lid is flipped, we should feel okay, and we should feel love, and we should feel all of those things. Like, we need to let that come out, right? Like, that is part of, I think, where we don't talk about in the self-help, right? Like, this isn't putting the Band-Aid on when we're feeling what we're feeling. It's allowing that to come out, up and out. And then once we have simmered down, for lack of a better word, then coming back to what would love do? What does love look like? How does love act in this situation, or respond in this situation? So,
And it's scary. Brenda, I want to ask your perception, if that's something you want to share, about how empowerment or power has like impacted you. And I also want to say that it's scary to actually just say this and put this out there, but like, our whole intention for Hue University is right now we're doing the work to be that safe space for other people, then to start sharing in that space, and for us to be able to mentor people through this process of growth, evolution, and change, so that we can start to change that narrative for people and give them a safe place to outlet those emotions, knowing that sometimes, like, especially letting anger out, it can feel like, you know, a 2-year-old with keys to the Lamborghini.
I'm there. Feeling a little reckless.
I wouldn't say Lamborghini. It's more like a sledgehammer.
I'm like, where's my scissors?
China. That's what it feels more like.
Here's around the house with scissors.
Here's a box of matches.
Yeah. That's destroying some shit. Lamborghini.
And Tanya, I want to just like add to that. To me, I also think, and I think Erin, you might have said this earlier. I think for some, it just also puts some of this emotion into language. Like, we have all experienced so much of the same things. And then when we verbalize it and we bring it to light, somebody, like, how many times has my verbal explosion on Marco Polo resonated with you all, right? And then you all reflect that back to me, and I'm like, oh, so I'm not the only one that has this like inner beast that I'm, you know, like wrestling with sometimes. And I feel like so many people are like feeling isolated, right? And so just us sharing our stories gives sometimes just the language and the experience and the seen factor, right? Like to feel seen in that moment, that it's like normal, it's human, right?
I think it's comfort.
Yeah.
Comfort in not being alone.
Yeah. And I want to bring back something that Tanya always says, and I actually used it today, and I think is just the best it might not be your fault, but it's like your responsibility, and it's like it's your opportunity. And like all of this is just part of your human experience. And now it's like, look what you get to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brenda, I didn't want you to feel uninvited to share from the power perspective. What has...
For me, and it's tough to be put on the spot, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Love was weakness, and love had to be earned. And so the feeling of power or squashing the love basically is really, to me, what power is squashing the love, was safety. Because then if I didn't need the love, I was safe because it wasn't being given freely. And yeah, that's pretty much, that's my explanation of how power has impacted my life. And so it's been a hard breaking of the shell to allow me to feel those feelings at all, because it's much easier to be an island, or it felt like it was much easier to be an island. And because then you weren't dependent on anybody, you also weren't going to get rejected by somebody or have love given and then withheld, or it was just safer. And so coming into this experience with you guys, sometimes, and I'll be honest, sometimes it still feels too good to be true, that I am accepted for who I am, flaws and all, and humanness and all, and that lid flipping doesn't mean a removal of love. It doesn't mean that I'm any less of a person. It happens. And, you know, we're all working on, I'll call it response time, you know, how long it takes us to come from full up to coming back down. Because I used to spiral a lot in the flipped position for a long, long time. Different things would flip me and I would just sit in that and wallow in it. Doesn't sound like the right thing, but almost revel in it because it kept me going. And justifying feelings of power that I had, you know, maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but that's the words that are coming for me right now.
It makes perfect sense. And that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for allowing yourself to be soft and vulnerable.
Not every day, not every minute, but it's a work in progress.
We're all a work in progress. I'm exploring finding my power from a resource place. So that's, for me, that's finding my empowerment. I don't need to have power over anyone. I don't need to be under anyone else's power. So finding that harmony there has been, you know, a little bit more of my unknown versus, you know, love has been my known field, and it's still, it also has its spectrum, right? Feeling like you have none to give or it's being taken away from you. But now that I feel like I'm filled up with unconditional love, it's been that power piece for me, right? So that helps me even understand you more and love you that much more.
And we share the gate 51, 25, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Yep. Guys, this has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Coffee chat / cry chats. Always. I was just going to say thank you for sharing.
Thank you for listening. Until next
you.
time, love you all.